Hi, my name is Nahaliel, and I'm here to tell you my story. What I'd like to tell you today is how I found out what God's will was for my life. I want to take you to, 50 years ago, I was looking for that, and I'll tell you how I got there. This is my story. I'm going to read it to you. I was born 10 years after the end of World War II in a small, hot, and dusty town in the interior, semi-arid lands of northeast Brazil. When I was 6, I was sent away from home to a missionary school in a city on the coast where I spent the school year away from my parents. My parents, being dutiful Baptist missionaries, thought I needed an excellent education and thought that the sacrifice was necessary. Needless to say, it was very difficult for me and for them. They later confessed that to me. And it was hard. It was very hard to be away from your parents because we were, from September to December, we were gone from home, away from our parents. And then we had a little brief Christmas time where sometimes we got to go home and stay with our parents. So it was hard. But being in school and being away from my parents and living with all these children, I began to notice relationships. It's like I could see how children treated each other.
Yeah.
And in many ways I was horrified because it was hard. It was really hard to get along with some and easier to get along with others. And then there was rivalries, and some people I wanted some boys' attention, and and my friend wanted his attention too, and then we'd get into it with each other, and get into fights and punch each other and do all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we weren't always fighting.
Yeah.
Sometimes we were friends, and sometimes we were enemies. Just like that.
Yeah.
So, but these are all missionary kids, and this
all
is
of them were.
all of them.
Wow.
There was about 50 of us.
Wow.
So, in the midst of all that, we had to go to church on Sunday. And we were Baptists. My parents were Baptists, and the school was Baptist. And so on Sunday, we would get taken to different little churches around the city. And if you know Brazil, where I grew up, there are very poor sections of town. Very poor. I mean, people they would come barefoot to church, and they would have colorless clothing and sometimes dirty. Little children. So one Sunday school, my dorm parent, the one was like a mother to us, she was teaching Sunday school class in a very poor section of town. And I was sitting there watching her, and she was talking about Jesus and how Jesus died for me. And I had all this stuff accumulated in my conscience, just all these little things we did to each other and rivalries and fights and whatever. I mean, we got spanked for them too, but I mean, that was years ago, But all this stuff was accumulated in my conscience, and when she was talking, I just knew that that's what I needed. I needed Jesus, and I don't know, can't tell you how I knew it. It just knew. So, being very shy, she asked at the end if anybody wanted to accept Jesus, and I kind of went like this, raised my hand a little bit, and hoping that she would see me, but then at the same time being totally intimidated, about presenting myself in public, all the other little children around. So she didn't say anything, but when we got home, she called me in and she said, I saw you raising your hand. I said, do you want to accept Jesus? And I said, yes. And she said, well, pray this prayer after me. And it was the sinner's prayer. I'm sure some people are familiar with that. They invite Jesus into their hearts. So I did that, and immediately I was just like, whew. It's like on a cloud, just like somebody had taken tremendous weight off of me. And so there I was, little kid of 7 years old, second year of school. And I was extremely happy for one day. And then dove right back into the sinner's realm, us boys in our section of the house and the girls in the other section of the house and all that, trying to live together. It was just like a bunch of unredeemed kids, but we more or less got along. But it still bothered me. And as time went on, I began, assuming that I was saved, just thinking, yeah, I'm saved. I invited Jesus into my heart. But there was this thing in me that just, why do I act like this? It just bothered me. So when I was 14, I started getting up early in the morning and looking for the sunrise and thinking somehow I was going to see God there. So I would pray, and I had read some things about meditation or something, there's the Psalms, and I would read a psalm and pray to God because I was looking for something. I needed something. I didn't know exactly what it was. And I couldn't, at the time, I couldn't turn to my teachers. And I know they did the best to teach us. They gave us an excellent education. And I know that my dorm parents tried their best. They weren't insincere people. But I knew they didn't have the answer because I could see, your observation, you can see that they themselves didn't really get along with each other. And there was somehow just closed to them. I couldn't trust them. So I didn't look to them for help. I don't know. Maybe sometimes I did, and they would give me some sort of teaching about having devotions in the morning and making sure you got up and read your Bible in the morning, that God would speak to you somehow. But in the end, I didn't really get help for what was going on inside of me. So anyway, I hated the way we treated each other. I had thought that being saved, and that if we were all saved, then we would be different. We'd be some kind of love. At 14, I was reading the Bible, and at 16, I was seeing stuff in Acts where they lived together and there was love. And 1 Corinthians 13, everybody knows, love is this way, love is that way. And I said, well, goodness, it seems like what John is trying to say in John 13 and in 1 John is that we should all love each other. And I said, I don't see this love here in my school. And I didn't see it at home either. One thing that helped me a lot, I think, to understand a little bit was going to Bible camp. There, we had a great time, and we had Bible teaching continually all morning long. Afternoon, we had games and fun and swimming and all this kind of stuff. And I would go home thinking, well, that's the life, that camaraderie, that friendship, the good times together that we had. I said, that's what I want for the rest of my life. I'd go home and I'd cry. I was a teenager, and I'd go home and cry and then try to maintain that feeling that I got from Bible camp. But it would fade after a week. After a week's time, I was back to, listening to the Beatles and going downtown to watch television and whatever. Because we didn't have television in my house, but I could go down to my friend's house on a bicycle downtown and watch TV at his house. But anyway, that didn't help. And the 50 science fiction books my dad gave me to read didn't help either. So it just made my mind go somewhere else, So when I was 18, I remember this pretty clearly. When you're 18, you're coming to the end of high school, and there I was in the boarding school in this city, Fortaleza, northeast Brazil. I was there, and the future was looming, here I go, I leave home, I go away from school, from my parents, everybody I know, I'm going to a college somewhere. What am I going to do? What do I do? What do I do? It's a big question. So I ended up in Bryan College, in Dayton, Tennessee, through some pretty miraculous, what I consider to be like activity of angels. I was on my bed that one afternoon there in the dorm, and I was crying out. I was saying, God, help me, because I just couldn't keep from all those misdemeanors, those little sins you commit, and they bother you, and they're always nagging at you, those little things that you do. And then there was the other things that were a bit more criminal, like sneaking out at night or whatever it was we did. Those things really bothered me. And I was just saying, how do I stop? How can I be saved from sin? Not just get forgiven, okay, I go and confess what I did, and I confess it to God, and He forgives me, but how do I stop? What can I need to do something. I need to, like some people say, serve God, some way. So that became the main thing in my heart, is what do I do with my life? And through different circumstances that happened, I ended up at Bryan College. That's in the city of Dayton, Tennessee, about 50 miles north, slightly northeast of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And there I started my higher education, Anyway, I wrote it all down here. I'll just say this, that all the courses I took, Bible, Old Testament, philosophy class just kind of gives you information you don't need to know, And history was very interesting. When I was a child, wasn't interested in history, but once I got to college, history just... Oh yeah. When I got to college, history just became one of my major subjects. I just gobbled it down and was going, goodness, is this what humanity did? Is this what people did? You start learning about, for one thing, the Spanish Inquisition and what the church did, and the Crusades and the torture of millions of people, and the popes and their immoral activities and their political conquests, and just I go, what is all this, But it was interesting to me because it just showed, well, that's me, What's in them is in me. We're all a bunch of sinners. So what's salvation? Does salvation just forgive you to go to heaven someday? Or is there something more? And I always had the feeling there had to be something more. And another thing I had a hard time with was because all my professors and everybody agreed that if you didn't accept Jesus into your heart, that you were going to the lake of fire no matter how good you were. And I said, but wait a minute. I said, I know some good people. And they aren't Christians. And I said, now how does that fit in? Well, they're going to the lake of fire. I said, yeah, but the lake of fire is just eternal fire. It's like a planet that's turned into a star. And it's just an inferno of this fire, and you have this body that doesn't burn, and you're sitting there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and without end. For what? For struggling on this planet? Trying to do the best you can? And of course, everybody sins, comes short of the glory of God. Yeah, that was hard for me to take. I didn't understand it. And I thought, well, there's got to be another way out. But that's another story. That's another story. But anyway, what I was searching for was, what do I do with my life? So, chapel, revival speakers, and even basketball just confirmed what my uneasy feeling that we were all a bunch of lost. I started seeing myself as a lost Christian, like a Christian without a purpose. Going to church, I said, this isn't have it. Just going to church. There has to be some kind of participation. I said, somehow we have to be the church, not just go to church, So there I was, lost in my selfishness and no path, no way to follow. And say, most of us there at college were just like, some people were looking for wives, some people were looking for popularity, some people were there playing ping pong, and just taking it easy. And I said, well, this is kind of funny. I'm sitting in my dorm room there at Bryan College, and I'm studying away, and my roommate comes in, and he was probably out playing ping pong, and he comes in, this big, tall, handsome fellow. And he says to me, he says, how do you get such good grades? And I said, well, while you're playing ping pong, I'm over here studying, you know. I said, that's what I came for. So I don't know why you're here, but I came here for this. And it just rings in my mind as a lesson, you know, that most of the people are just lost. They didn't know what they were doing. And there was all kinds of girls looking for husbands, and then the music majors were over there doing something else, you know. So during winter break that year, this was 1973, I was there, and I had fallen in love with this girl down in Brazil. She was like a missionary girl, and she had gone home to her house in Santa Barbara, California. So we were corresponding, and I said, I'm going to go out there and visit her. And my hopes was I was going to marry her, but she had other ideas. And when I got there, she told me. And it was like, whoa, like getting slammed down. I was just heartbroken. And she had, I was at her house, and so I went into my room, and there, on my knees, I broke down, just wept. And I cried out to God, and I said...
Could you repeat that part? Just go back like 10 seconds. So she had other plans?
Yeah, she had other plans. I went out to visit this girl I had fallen in love with in Santa Barbara. And I was hoping to marry her, but she had other plans. And so when I got there at her parents' house, and I was going to spend the Christmas vacation there at her house, she told me. And so that just broke my heart. I was just utterly floored. Literally, I went into my room, got on my knees, I remember it well, and wept. And it just occurred to me that the God of heaven was trying to tell me something. He was trying to tell me something. He was saying, look, this isn't the way. So I surrendered. I just gave my life to him and said, look, I want to do your will, whatever it is. Just show me the way. Anyway, I couldn't stay there after all that. I stayed a few more days, but it was like terrible. So I retreated to a friend's house. Actually, I drove out with this friend, and she had told me, she was a senior in college, she had told me, look, if things don't go well for you, she says, you come over to my home. And it was in Pomona, near Los Angeles. I assume it's a suburb. I'm not too familiar with Los Angeles. But I went out there and stayed. They received me, and her family received me. It was a big family, lots of children, and they received me and treated me like a son, and it was nice. It was really nice. So while I was there, they took me to Calvary Chapel. And that was an experience. I mean, I was a regular Baptist. When you say regular, that means straight, not short hair. Of course, since I had gone to Bryan College and my hair was long now, but short hair, don't clap in church, stand when the preacher says stand, sit down, sing hymns from the hymnal. The very standard, I don't know what to call it, Baptist way, sort of formal. And I go into this church where everybody's sitting in this like an amphitheater, and there's this rock band up front. Rock band's an exaggeration. I would say it was soft, like soft popular music today. Well, I don't even know what popular music is like today, but sorry. But soft rock. Okay, and they led the worship service, and I'm going, whoa, this is really different. This is very interesting, and the words were really nice. They were bringing attention to Jesus, and the music was really nice. It wasn't obnoxious or raucous or anything, and I enjoyed it. And at some point, the leader of the band started giving me sort of a sermon. I'm not My memory doesn't tell me whether it was just him, but there might have been an older man that stood up later. And then he said, brothers and sisters, turn around and see those beside you and hug them because we love each other. You know? So we were there hugging each other, and I'm kind of going, whoa. He says, we don't do this in the Baptist church, you know. But I wasn't against it. So I hugged the person on this side and hugged the person on that side and left there with a good feeling. But you know, nothing really touched deep down inside. I didn't find any answers there. And so I went.
As far as like God's will.
Yeah. I didn't find out God's will. It wasn't in the sermon. There wasn't anything there for me, like an authoritative voice, like a prophetic voice that would call me to anything. So after visiting Disney World, of course, and spending a day there and spending a day in the mountains and going around a little bit, we drove back to Tennessee. It's a long ways. And it was wintertime, so we saw a lot of ice and accidents on the road. But fortunately, we made it. And I got back into college. And I got there with the same attitude. What is God's will for my life? And I thought of different things, you know, like, well, maybe I could be a musician, you know, maybe I could start taking music lessons. I did. I actually took piano for those years I was in college. And, or maybe, you know, maybe I can be like the Wycliffe translator. I started in that direction. And maybe that'll be what I'm going to do. But there wasn't anybody or any real voice of authority telling me what to do with my life. So, let's see. The following summer, 74, I took on a job at the college mowing lawns, which I really enjoyed because I was outside in the sunshine. And Tennessee has some really nice weather at times, you know, very beautiful. And it was a beautiful campus up on a hill. And I rented a house, well, actually I rented an apartment beneath a house just on the edge of the campus, and it's kind of going downhill there. And below the hill, there's a highway, I think it's 27 or something, I can't remember. And then you cross the highway and you're in Dayton, Tennessee, which was a small town back then. Still is, I think. And I rented a house there for my parents because they were coming up from Brazil to spend furlough. I think if you know what furlough is, it's just like a break from being a missionary. So they were coming up to spend the year there, and they had decided to come live where I was, and they were going to take me into their house so I didn't have to pay the bed and breakfast or whatever it is that you do in college. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go down and check on the house, see how it's doing, because it was alone. So I walked out of my apartment, a beautiful day, sunshine, blue skies. I said, this is going to be great. I'm going to have this nice walk down to town. I got on the other side of the road, and this big car driven by this elderly gentleman who was a bachelor, and he was part of the college, about 75 years old. He pulls up alongside me and stops, and I go, uh-oh, what's this? You know. So he reaches across and he opens the passenger door and he says, get in. And I'm going, what? But it's like he expected me to obey him, so I'm going, here's this older man out telling me to get in, so I'm going to get in, you know. In due respect, I just got in, sat down. I'm going, what is going on here? Close the door, and he drives down the hill, and we drive in silence. And it was about a 5-minute drive, maybe 7-minute drive down to Dayton, and utter silence. Doesn't say a word, doesn't ask me where I'm going. And he drives right into town. It's a small town, so no worries. And he parks right in front of the police station. So, without a word, he grabs his books that were there on the seat next to him, gets out, goes off and disappears into this old train station that was there. Like it was abandoned. The windows were out, and it was just totally abandoned. So I get out, kind of scratching my head and saying, what in the world, you know? Well, no problem. Says I headed the other direction. And I'm about 20 yards down, going in that direction over to the house, when I hear behind me tires screeching, and I look behind me, and it's my friend from college, David. I forget his name, but it's been many years. But he pulls in screeching and hops out of his car, and he yells at me and said, "Hey, you want to go to a rap session?" And I said, What's a rap session? You know, and he says, "Oh, just come on." He says, "Come on." I said, "Okay, yeah, well, you know, I can go see the house later. I'll go see what a rap session is." He says, of course, it wasn't what today is called rap. It's like an open forum where people sit around and talk, and they share what's on their hearts. And they share things that, like, sometimes intimate, you know, sort of what they feel about God and what they feel about religion, or what they feel about important things in their lives. So we go right to the train station where the old man disappeared, into the side door, and we go up these stairs up in the dark. It was kind of somber and spooky, you know. And we're going up these stairs, and I'm going, what is he getting me into here, you know? And then on the second floor, a few halls down, it's all empty, just bare walls, empty windows. And just a little ways down there was some light coming in through the windows. There was this circle of people seated in a circle, and they were talking about Jesus. So we sat down in the circle, and different people were sharing different things. And the one who was leading the discussion turned, and he asked each one, he said, "Are you alive or dead in Jesus? How do you feel?" You know? And when it came my turn to answer, I said, "Hey, I'm dead. Really, I'm dead. I don't know what's going on." He said, "Well, you can be alive." And I mean, somehow I received hope. And from that day on, I knew I had found something. I knew the answer was somewhere right there in those people. You know? So in time, a year later, the next summer, I dropped out of college. I said, "There's nothing here for me anymore. I know where I'm headed." And it was like the call, this is where you're going. This is what you've been asking for. This is the answer to that question, you know. So, let me just look at this here. Looking back on it, I was really amazed at the turn of events. Just there I was, poised to go ahead with some sort of career that I wasn't really sure of, but at least I had some kind of direction. And then this man comes along. He was like an angel, really. And he had a commanding voice, and he just told me to get in that car. And I couldn't say no. So that turned my whole life in a different direction. And the funny thing is that from that day on, I knew what to do with my life. I wrote this down. It said, "I received an answer in my heart and soul as to what God's will for me was." So that rep session that changed my life was 1974, and here it is, 2023. Time passes, friends.
So were they living together already at the rap session?
Yeah.
So you moved into the community.
I moved into what we thought at the time was a ministry. You know, it was like the Light Brigade, you know. And but we had a shepherd. You know, we had friends that would tell us what to do. You know. So these people live together, and they share all things in common, just like the early believers in the Book of Acts. You know how they all who believed were together and shared all things in common. It's like were together means they lived together, and they had a life together. It wasn't like each one held their own home as theirs and had their own jobs and did this kind of thing. They actually grouped together. Some people think many of them moved out of Jerusalem and just went and lived in tents right outside in a big, huge encampment there.
Huh.
And that's where they lived, outside the city, because there was no way they were going to get together in the big city. They were in the temple together daily, morning and evening. That's probably where they were, every morning, every evening. In the morning before work, in the evening after work. There was something going on there. And so I was reflecting on the Jesus movement. There's the Jesus revolution is being talked about right now. There's a hope that the Jesus revolution will spark a new movement in the 2023 society of America. But there still has to be a call, an authoritative call. There still has to be someone who's going to prophetically call them to something. That's what apostles do. Apostles and prophets, they're in the Bible. But as a Baptist, and somehow some doctrinal thing came in, and apostles and prophets kind of got put out of the Bible by some kind of dispensationalist theology. I don't know if most people know what dispensationalist theology is, but it's a way of blocking history, making blocks out of history and saying, well, God didn't act this way in this one, but now he's acting this way in this one. And he's dealing with humanity like this back then, but now he's dealing with humanity this way now. And that's what we call a doctrine, teaching. So
how did what you found at the rap session differ from the Jesus movement church you went to in California?
I see I'll be frank with you,
and how did the play out of it?
Yeah.
Because now you're talking 50
well,
years.
I'm looking back now. This is like 50 years ago, and nearly 50 years ago. And I'm looking back and I'm seeing that there was a tremendous spark of zeal in those young people that Chuck Smith drew into his church through the ministry of Lonnie Frisbee. And of course, Lonnie Frisbee's life, as you know, was he ended his life tragically. It's sad, really. And Chuck Smith, I think he passed away in 2015. And he's got many churches scattered throughout America. But I just saw it as a new kind of church. It's a new way of worship, much like Hillsong and some of these other great big churches that exist nowadays. There's a form of worship that draws people into large theater-like environments, or possibly even like, what do you call them, coliseums? No,
Amphitheater?
Amphitheaters or stadiums, like Billy Graham did, drawing thousands of people.
So it's sensational.
Yeah, it is sensational, and it's moving. It really pumps up your emotions. You get really thinking that God is there. And but really, I'm going to say this. I'm not an extreme, high authority on this, but you could say that many shows could do that kind of thing for you, bring you into an emotional high. But there is a spiritual element to it. It's religious. It's got Jesus at the middle of it. But that wasn't what I was looking for. I wasn't at the time. I wasn't condemning any of that. What I was thinking was, I need to know what God's purpose is for my life, what I'm going to do with my life. I wasn't seeing it as
Can you say again I need to know what God's purpose is for my life?
What?
Can you say that again? I need to know what God's purpose is.
I needed to know what God's purpose was for my life.
Yeah. What to do.
Yeah, not how you worship is one thing, but what you do on a daily basis is another thing. What am I part of? What am I working for? What's my purpose? And so I found that in just being a servant. When I joined those people that I met, then I just served them. I served them. I did whatever they told me to do. Sometimes I worked in this restaurant called the Yellow Deli, and other times I split wood, I worked as a mechanic. I repaired bicycles. Done a number of things throughout the years. But I was under authority. I was doing what I was called to do. And it's how Abraham was. He was under authority. God spoke to him. He didn't tell him to do something fantastic, but it was probably hard for him. Leave your family, leave your father's household, and go to where I'm going to show you. So he picks up and he goes. And God shows him where to go. Okay, that's a man under authority. He's not doing some grandiose spiritual thing. He's just being obedient to leave his family behind, his parents, and the city, the idolatrous city where he lived, and he went somewhere else. And he was separate. And that was the beginning of the nation, Israel. Abraham's faith. That was his faith. Simply did what he was told to do by the God of heaven. So we understand that's what it's like a call. What are we called to?
That's
so
what happened on Pentecost.
Yeah, well, at Pentecost it was like, okay, these Israelites who had crucified or participated in the crucifixion some way or another, approving of it or whatever, they were convicted to the heart, and they say to the apostles, the sent ones, the ones that were sent in Matthew 28, 18 and 19 and 20, or maybe just 19 and 20, by the one who has all authority in heaven and earth, they're sent to make disciples, to teach them to obey everything that the Master told them, that Jesus told them to do. So these are the things I've taught you. Now you go out and you make disciples and you teach them to do the very same thing. That's what an apostle is. They have authority. It's an authority granted to them by the one who has all authority in heaven and on earth. So those are what we call sent ones. People would call them apostles. And as a Baptist, we were taught that they didn't exist anymore. So the very essence of the kingdom of God or the church was gone, was eliminated by a doctrinal thing. They don't exist anymore. They're back then. But without apostles, there's no call. Without sent ones, there's no church. So you can think that what you're going to is a church, but the church is a life together. That's what it really is. So when they were told what to do, when the Apostle Peter said, repent, be baptized, he was saying, turn around from what you're doing and be cleansed, be washed, get your conscience clean, and then receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, which was promised way back. It's a promise from the new covenant, way back in Jeremiah's time. In Isaiah, they promised the new covenant. And so that was what the new covenant was, the Spirit in you, God living in you, just like he lived in the man Jesus. He was right there. So now, because we're cleansed in the waters of baptism, we have the Spirit of the living God in us. That's what they meant. That's the new covenant. So they didn't live by a set of rules anymore, not the laws of the old covenant, but they lived by the laws of the new covenant that was inside of them, coming out of them. And that's what the salvation that I was looking for, that's where it comes from. So back then, in the days of the Jesus movement, you could say a lot of seeds were scattered. And there was thousands that were being baptized and were full of zeal and proclaiming Jesus. And you can see videos of it, even on, I think, YouTube, or just look for the Jesus movement in 1972. And now there's this thing out called, this TV series called The Chosen, that depicts a very human Jesus who performs miracles and leads his disciples as a band of, a communal band, you might say, and goes around and I guess the series hasn't come to the crucifixion yet. I suppose that might be coming down the line. But and then on top of that, that very figure who is Jesus in The Chosen becomes Lonnie Frisbee in the movie that's about to come out. And Lonnie Frisbee is a central figure in the Jesus movement. And he's the one that joins Chuck Smith in Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
And brings all the hippie type people in. and it's in, and I suppose you could say it was a beautiful thing that happened. But the problem is where did it go? So we have done a little bit of research, and it seems like that most of the Jesus movement got embraced right back into the church. The established churches.
Sitting in the pews.
Yeah, they're back sitting in the pews. They're just placed right back in the pews. And all of them cut their hair, and nowadays they're upright citizens, American citizens who go to church on Sunday. So the Jesus movement was absorbed by the leadership of the established church. Now to us that means that the zeal is gone.
Yeah.
The living together, the communal life, the friendship, the love, actually, whatever they felt at the time is gone. So now some of the people that we have seen on these prequels, or what do you call them?
Documentaries?
Yeah, documentaries say that they hope that the Jesus movement will be rekindled.
Mm.
But where are they going to take them?
Yeah.
That's the answer. Like for my life, where was I going to go? What was I going to do? So who told the Jesus movement, the people in the Jesus movement, what to do with their lives? Well, we don't know. It looks like by 1972 and that they were reabsorbed into the church and back to the pews.
Yeah.
And that's the life that I came to a certain point in my life where I saw sitting in a pew doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
That's not going to church on Sunday and Wednesday night as a Baptist wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
It had to be a total consuming fire of a life where I was under authority and I was sent and I was told what to do, and I could live my life knowing I was doing God's will at every moment of the day. I wasn't living for myself anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't have to figure out what God's will was because I was in His body. I was in a living, organic movement of people that had a purpose. And just like the nerves in my body tell my hand what to do, they're connected to the head. So the nerves, they're like the leaders of my community, and I'm here at the hand. Or at some point or other, I might become one of the nerves. You know, I don't become the head, because the head is our master, Yahshua, the Messiah, today called Jesus, the Christ. But anyway, this movement's still going on. I'm still part of it. It's not waning. It's not fading out. It's waxing. It's growing. We're in our hearts. In my heart, it's firmer than ever. You know, it's a surrendered life. It's a life where you become the servant. You become the servant of all. Just like he said. Okay, this is really interesting. He said, "We know love by this." This is John in 1 John chapter 3. He says, "We know love by this, that He laid down His life for us. So ought we to lay down our lives for our brothers." What does that mean? What does that mean? And we know we don't pass from death to life because we love the brothers. We know we've passed from death to life because we love the brothers. We know because we're loving. We'll have that deep understanding that we've passed from death to life. It's not like you're going to love and then that's your salvation. It's like a works salvation. You don't do that. It's the other way around. You're first. You receive forgiveness. You receive the Holy Spirit, and He gives you the capacity to love. Then you know you're on the right path. As you love your brothers and you're submitted to them, like in Ephesians 5:21, it says, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of Messiah. So anyway, it's a body. It's like 1 Corinthians 12, talks about it. It says, so is, as the human body is, so is Messiah. So is the Christ, That's what He is on earth today. He's a body of believers. And they, like the first believers, have all things in common. All who believed were together and had all things in common. So anyway, that's what I found. And that would be the continuation. If the Jesus movement would go in that direction, to the fellowship of believers, to a common life together, all in or all out, but not halfway in, halfway out. No, out of this world and into the kingdom of God.
Yeah, not just emotional spirits.
No. Yeah. Somebody said the other day, said that many people are into spiritism. Well, the spiritism I know, living in Brazil, comes from Africa. And it has been systematized into sort of a ministry of spirits. And but I think that this person was talking about a different kind of spiritism. It's like a spiritual, like good thing. I don't know how to explain it.
Opening yourself to the universe is how people...
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
They call it the universe, but really it's just a plethora of spirits.
Yeah. Well, then it would be like similar things, because if you get into African spiritism, there's many entities.
Yeah. It's the same thing, just less organized.
Yeah. More, say, undefined. Yeah. Anyway, but that doesn't get it, because that doesn't affect your life and your relationships. The reason that Messiah came to give us forgiveness was to deal with our relationships and how we treat one another. Now that's an essential part of the gospel that a lot of people are missing it. When you read John 17, you're going to see, he says, the Master says, Yahshua, the Messiah, says, he says, let them be one, that the world may know that you sent me, Father. It authenticates the Messiah's ministry on the earth. It brings an end to the accusation that God doesn't love people, that he could care less what happens to humanity. And that's what the message is right now. God doesn't care about anything. But what it does is they said, no, I sent my son. And that's what I could do for humanity, was that. And so that unity is what speaks to the world. He said that the world may know that the Father sent the Son. That unity has to happen. It has to be real. It's one mind, one heart, one way. Not any other type of unity. Not this, what they call unity in diversity. That doesn't get it. That's not going to do anything. That is probably the way of the evil one. That's the way he's going to get people together. Let's all be friends, respect each other's diversity, and you're this way and I'm that way, but we're all one in Jesus. That's not going to work. It's one heart and one way. He doesn't accept any other kind of... And that's what will show the world that this man, the Son of God, the Son of Man, that this man is God's anointed. So I guess we could stop there and just say, that's what has to happen.